Hello and welcome to the Football Breakdown. On today's episode, we have the last-minute postponements, freak own goals, and the most controversial keepy-ups in recent times. I'm Ian Cooper.
And I'm Matthew South.
Welcome, everyone. And hello, Matthew. How are we doing? Did you watch any football this weekend?
Hello, Ian. Yes, I did. Well, of course, we watched the same football on Friday night over the phone, which was an interesting watch. And then yesterday, I was actually lucky enough to go to Southampton-Liverpool, which was an interesting game. Some poor Southampton passing around the back led to their ultimate demise, but honestly, they actually showed a lot going forward. Tyler Dibling really impressing me watching him in person, so excited to see more of him going forward. How about yourself?
Yeah, good, thank you. I can only imagine that was, even with the comical errors and shoot themselves in the foot, was much better football than the match that we watched on the Friday. It was so poor. It sort of put me off of the weekend and keeping up results. But at least we can say we weren't struck by Storm Burt and we didn't have any game postponements. Unlike a lot of the Football League across Scotland and England. Now, Matthew, did you see it went even as high up as the Championship with the game of Blackburn and Portsmouth being called off? Now, how would you feel if you had found out that on the coach trip up there that the game had been cancelled?
I think I'd be pretty disappointed. What would you do in that situation? Like, you're already making your way up north. I guess for them it wasn't too late on. It was 11 a.m. So maybe you turn around for the day and just call it there, go home, or maybe you try and check out some football elsewhere, which I believe some Portsmouth fans did, which was cool to see. But at least they were warned at 11:30 or 11 a.m. and not at 2 p.m, an hour before their scheduled kickoff time, which we saw in multiple games across England and Scotland. Well, actually, speaking of Portsmouth fans turning up at other grounds, I did see on X that a few of them tried to go and watch Salford Bromley, only for that game to be cancelled at 10-2, and then they had to make alternative arrangements. So looks like a few of them were having pretty bad luck on their Saturday. But 10-2, and then AFC Fylde and Ebbsfleet was cancelled at 10-2 after they told their fans at midday that, Ebbsfleet fans told their fans at midday that the communication with the hosts Fylde had been told that the weather wasn't going to impact their game, only to have that reversed an hour later. Ian, what are your thoughts on the late calls of the postponements?
See, I don't really get what the rules are set in place. So from my understanding, it's just sort of based on when the referee turns up. I don't know if they're due to turn up at a certain time to do these pitch inspections. I believe it's meant to be a few hours before the games, which just doesn't feel like it works in favour of the fans, especially the away travelling fans. And I just don't see the fairness in it. Do we need to have a rethink of the rules set for postponements, say early hours of the morning, or do you even make the call the night before? See, I know you're going to have exceptions where during the day you could go, actually the game could have been played, but are you just saving the faff and almost the embarrassment really from the home club? Because it's always the home club that gets the flack from this, when it's not always in their position to make these calls.
No, exactly. Like in League Two, you had 3 postponements in the English League Two. That is, so you had Bradford Accrington was called off. That was called off at 10:30 in the morning. You had Fleetwood MK Dons called off. I think that was called off at 10:30 or 11 in the morning. And then you had Salford Bromley, as I mentioned, which was called off at 1:50, an hour 10 minutes before kickoff. Now, of course, you want to give like the best possible, at the most possible time to get the game on. But these weather conditions weren't a surprise this weekend. We had bad weather all week leading into it, in England, in Scotland. So come Friday night, come Saturday morning, when you know that the pitch isn't going to be playable. Like, I don't really know what they're waiting for and they're what's really they're deciding. Of course, things change and things happen, and I don't want to be too harsh. I want to try and give everyone the benefit of the doubt, but listen, like, we all saw the weather over this weekend. I just feel that calling a game off at 2 p.m. is just inexcusable to like the traveling fans. A lot of them making like 4 or 5 hour journeys this weekend to a game that should have been called off well before they set off.
So yeah, the only real surprisement was for a game in the championship to be called off, where there was a lot of talk, especially from the Pompey fans, but also just other fans of championship clubs. They were almost mocking Blackburn for not being able to get their game played. But realistically, when you've got that much water, what are they expected to do?
No, exactly. Like postponements are going to happen. Pretty much all levels of football. Like, I know, there weren't any postponements in the Prem, but listen, it's all location based. It's all depends on what happens at the end of the day, and were you affected more than others. And in Blackburn's case, they were. So very unfortunate for them. Do you have the best drainage system in place? Well, maybe they don't have the money to get that in place compared to other clubs, but still, when you're met with the weather that we've been met with, it's not really a surprise that we were getting hit this high up the football league. In my opinion, I feel like it's harsh, and Blackburn did call the game off early enough. I know some Portsmouth fans all Portsmouth fans would have been on their way, but like, it's not much more you can do. They still called off 4 hours before kickoff. It's not like they called it off 10 minutes before. So yeah, I feel like everyone's kind of in a tough situation when it comes to postponements. But no, I'm not surprised the Championship club had to call it off just due to what we were seeing.
And it's what you mentioned to me, we recording this with saying you could use rain covers and that sort of thing. But when you take them off, where is the water going to go? You just can't get around this sort of situation, can you?
No, exactly. If you've got a ton of water that's fallen on your pitch that you've covered with rain covers, when you go to take this off, there's nowhere for the water. Like, you can't just like funnel it out of the stadium. It's gonna go somewhere. So like, obviously the pitch is gonna get damaged, and it doesn't have to be the whole pitch. Like, it could literally just be parts of the pitch that are unplayable. But that's probably enough. I did see a video going around. I believe it was Maidstone versus Salisbury. I might have got the teams wrong there, but I'm pretty sure it was at Salisbury. And the ref was doing the pitch inspection, and it looks like the ball was bouncing fine in the video. And you're like, well, why is this being called off? But then people are saying no, like the corners were flooded where he's not bouncing the ball. Like, come on, the video's misleading. And it's like, yeah, I suppose the pitches, football's played all over the pitch. It's not just played at one point. You can't just pick and choose where the pitch is acceptable and where it isn't. If part of it isn't acceptable, that's too much that isn't.
No, and if you want to see two sets of clubs make a really poor decision and leave it really late, then we need to go to Scotland, where if you go to the game of Edinburgh City versus East Fife FC, East Fife must be delighted. They're getting 2 mentions in a row on this podcast. But so they announced at 2 o'clock for their 3 o'clock game that there was going to be a pitch inspection at 2:30. Like, never mind talking about the game being postponed. They've announced a pitch inspection an hour away, an hour off of kickoff, with no indication before that.
I mean,
That's crazy.
that is ridiculous. Like, the pitch inspection announced at 2:30. At 2:30, like, half your fans are going to be in the stadium, like, just watching a pitch inspection. Like, what is going on?
No, and then there were some clubs that did it really well. So if you look at like I believe it was Dundee versus Rangers. They ended up just delaying their game. They were still confident that they could get the game played. Okay, they've put themselves under a lot of pressure there by announcing a delay. Because you can only imagine if they had abandoned the game after a delay, the turmoil that would have been after it. But at least they got the game going.
Yeah, and they did get the game finished, and that's all you can really ask for. But yeah, it's that kind of thing of, well, if you're confident that the pitch is going to improve, or whatever the circumstances were, the team can get there. I believe that one was to do with travel delays as well, was it not? I know the
Yes, it
Dundee
was.
team were running late, yeah. So if you know a team's going to get there eventually, then if the pitch is playable, you may as well get the game on in that case. So yeah, fair play for them to finishing off that one and not adding to the backlog of fixtures that some clubs are starting to pick up so far this season.
And that's really the story of this. It's not so much how it's not even how it's handled, really. I just feel like there needs to be a clear set of rules put in place. As mentioned earlier, I would really like to see it being announced the day before. I know it's going to be really tricky, but at least everyone knows where they stand with it as well. But then I suppose
Yeah, that's true.
that involves the referee being there because it's the referee's call. So is that where you then change? Is it the home club to make the decision? But then maybe that also involves a bit of controversy. Well, it welcomes controversy, should I say?
Yeah, I guess the issue with the day before is that if your pitch is terrible one day but the forecast is sunshine the next, are you having to then base it? Are you having to cancel based on the present, or are you gambling on the future? And then after that time, obviously, if the pitch isn't playable, like, you have to call it off anyway. So maybe there should just be some kind of, well, I don't want to say fines, but fines or sanctions that if you're cancelling a game because your pitch is unplayable an hour before kickoff, like, that's where we're having issues of, well, the away team, the away fans, the away fans are funding themselves to get to a game. However many of them have made a trip all the way up and an hour before kickoff, when most of them will be in that town or city, find out it's postponed. That's it. Like, they're stuck now. They've paid for the travel. They just have to turn around and go home. And that's where it's like, well, should the home team then, if it's so close to kickoff, have some kind of sanction in place to be like, you should have been more prepared for this in the morning. You should have, if you knew, like, my issue with this weekend is the fact that, like, we'd seen the weather all week. It showed no signs of improvement. It had no forecast of improvements. So to be leaving stuff so late was just embarrassing for some clubs.
And again, sadly, it just feels like it's the fans that lose in this situation, whether it be financially or not. It There's only real one way to look at this. It's the clubs. They can survive this sort of thing. Okay, they're going to have rescheduled games, which is going to be a bit of an issue and a pain, especially with sort of the manager's thoughts and how he wants to set up his sort of a weekly training plans and that sort of thing. But it is the fans that come worse off here.
Yeah. I think it's just one of those things of, like, some teams, well, a lot of teams, fine, postponements happen, got them in early enough. But yeah, the fans who have, made a trip, games got cancelled, gone home, and now going to be asked to make the trip again in a few weeks' time or a few months' time, whenever it gets fitted in. Now it's going to be on a midweek, most likely. Yeah, it's just, it's not fun for them, and it's, I guess it's what comes with supporting a football team sometimes. But no one likes to feel like they're just wasting their money on making pointless trips across the country week in, week out. And we're in that kind of season now where I don't think these are going to be the last postponements we see, unfortunately, until, well, early next year. So fingers crossed that we don't see many, but I can't see us seeing.
Talking of the weather from this weekend, we certainly saw a lot of comedy goals that happened throughout the Football League and non-league. And I want to talk about my favourite one that was in the Walton and Hersham opener against Gloucester City, where the keeper is quite clearly trying to pass it across goal to the centre-back while he's under pressure and ends up booting it into the top corner. This goal made it 1-0 at the time. It was one of the best own goals I genuinely think I've ever seen. he's clearly trying to blame it on the wind. I don't really get how he's hit it so hard. I don't even think, even if the storm was 2 times as powerful, it would have made any difference. And it was a nuts game, really, because it ended 4-all. Matt, did you have any games that you saw?
I did have a favourite goal from the weekend as well, and mine came from Boston United versus Braintree Town. Boston were leading 1-0 at this point, with new manager Graham Coughlan in charge, and striker Jacob Hazel basically from about 30 yards kind of hooks the ball towards goal. It doesn't have enough power, and it bounces 5 yards out right in front of Braintree Town's goalkeeper, only for it to bounce over him on his line, through his hands, and into the roof of the net. It's quite extraordinary, because the only way you can blame that on the weather is that your gloves are slippery, but other than that, it is just a remarkable mishap in goal. Braintree Town goalkeeper is former eccentric EFL and National League goalkeeper Lucas Coverland, who was, famously scored a goal in a playoff final before losing on penalties. But yeah, this is just another one in his highlight reel for sure.
See, I have actually seen this goal, and it really reminded me of the earlier high-profile mistake by Meslier in the game. Was it against Sheffield United?
Oh, it was against Sunderland, yes.
Sorry,
where
yes,
he
it was against Sunderland.
completely misjudges it, yes.
Although for this goal for Lucas Coughlin, I genuinely can't understand how it's happened.
Honestly, I'm watching it back, and the only thing, really weirdly, he is the ball has come from about 30 yards out. He is stood rooted on his line. Like, he has made a couple of steps back, obviously trying to judge the bounce of the ball, and he is rooted on his line, and the ball just shoots straight up through his hands into the roof of the net. And honestly, the fact that he hasn't even just parried it forwards or something is just so wild.
But look, of course, we'll put it down to the wind, especially for his confidence. But we all know it's an absolute blunder. Now, continue with the light-hearted stories of this week. Let's move back up to Scotland, where Dundee FC certainly had a great weekend, winning 4-1 to keep them clear of the relegation zone. But this isn't the big story from the game. After Hibs got off to an early lead, Jordan Obita was shown a red card for a reckless tackle, where Ellie Yohan had a really strange reaction to the decision, proceeded to keep up the ball a few yards away from the injured Dundee player. Now, have you seen this clip?
I have seen this clip, and I've seen the outrage from it, from the pundits and some fans, from Hibs and from other teams. And I have to admit that when I first watched it, I thought everyone was just kind of, doing that whole finding something to complain about, because to add the context, if people haven't seen it, like there's a player down injured on the floor, that the game stopped, everyone's kind of just standing around doing nothing really. Like, Abita's walking off the pitch, Hibs players are just kind of standing there, Dundee players are just kind of standing there, and then Ellie Yohan decides to just do a few keepy ups, and I'm like, that's fine, what's everyone really annoyed about? Couple around the worlds, I'm like, okay, fair enough. And then after about 10 seconds, he decides to balance the ball on his head, and that's where I kind of drew the line and was like, okay, you've gone a little too far there. It just seems like it's gone from keeping yourself warm and just doing some keepy ups to just showboating, despite the fact that you've just had a red card for your team.
Yeah, that was my thought. So it's sort of look, he's just stood around, the game's not being played, and the ball's at his feet, the ball's next to him. So it's natural for a player to just want hold of the ball. Fair enough. I'm exactly the same as you. It's when he starts balancing it on his head. It's just a really strange move.
It's just so odd. Honestly, the first 10 to 15 seconds of watching that video, I genuinely was like, oh god, everyone's just losing their head over nothing these days. And then he started balancing it on his head, and I just couldn't. I just laughed. I was just like, okay, I get it. I do get it. This is, it's just so stupid.
And look, the vibes at Hibernian aren't the highest at the minute. They are bottom of the league. They got into a 1-0 win. Oh, sorry, they were winning 1-0. So they're really desperate for this. And then they go down to 10 men. Their fans are fuming. They're waiting for the reaction of the manager to see what changes he's going to make. And they just look on the pitch. And their winger, who hasn't scored or assisted this season, just starts keeping up in showboating. And even the Dundee players are looking at him like, I can't quite believe what I'm seeing, but I'm not going to react because I just don't know. They clearly just don't know what to think.
I think this is the other thing, though, is a lot of people used it as a way to kind of showcase the attitude problem right now at Hibs. Like, obviously, they're sitting bottom of the league. They were going to lose that game 4-1. Things don't look like they're getting any better. And I do see that angle. But then I'm like, well, like if they were winning 4-0 at the time and he started doing it, would that be acceptable? If they were top of the league, would that be acceptable? Like, is that the angle, or are we just saying full stop, this is a no-go?
Okay, yeah, sure. Maybe the context of Hibs' season wasn't really needed there, but I just wanted to make sure you could see why, especially the Hibs fans were so annoyed with this. But look, I wanted to defend it. It's just too much. You can't keep the ball up for 20 seconds, start doing it around the world, flick it onto his neck as well. Like, it's just really bizarre.
I had all intention of defending this for the first 15 seconds of that video, and I was just like, I don't get the issue whatsoever. And then the remaining 10 seconds, I was like, okay, I give up. I'm not defending this.
The best defence I've seen to this is when the Hibs manager, David Gray, gets asked his opinion on it, and he goes, look, Ellie, he just loves his football. He just loves being on the pitch. And you're like, well, yeah, we can see that. We can see he loves it. But that might not be the reaction that the fans want to see. But look, you're going to defend your player. I don't think there's much too wrong about it. He's more than read the room wrong. But is it the worst thing in the world? No, of course not.
Yeah, I do think this like heavy focus on it by the pundits is a bit too much. That's not why they lost 4-1. If anything, they lost 4-1 because of the red card challenge that happened seconds before that moment.
And we won't get onto the fact that obviously this is a perfect story for the TV to find something controversial, a bit unusual, and blow it up.
Shock.
At least we didn't get a referee watch on it. Now it's that time of the week where it feels like it's every week at the minute. We have another managerial departure. Now this week we're going to be looking at Steve Cooper, who was sacked from Leicester City after losing 2-1 against Chelsea at home. Now, I'm going to give my opinions on this a little later, but Matt, I want to get your opinions from you at the minute. Do you feel like this was the right call?
I'm unsure at this moment in time. 12 games in, they have 10 points. Doesn't sound that good, but they are 16th. There's currently 4 teams worse than them in the league. And with that in mind, it's like, can you give him some more time? I know Wolves are starting to pick up results, so then you're looking at Ipswich, Crystal Palace and Southampton below them. You'd expect Palace to obviously pick up results as well sooner or later. The run of fixtures they've just had have been, fairly tough. Like, the last 4 games in the league, they've had Forest, who are going well, Ipswich away, where, okay, they need a last-minute equaliser, but we've seen that's a tough place to go. Manchester United away, like, it doesn't matter how bad they are, it's still a tough visit. And then Chelsea at home, who have been brilliant this season. So it's like it's come through like a tough set of fixtures. And when you kind of look back at everyone they've played so far this season, the results aren't that bad. I wouldn't say they've necessarily like had standout bad results. They're not getting hammered. It's just, I feel like Leicester fans are just finding it a bit uninspiring. And obviously, last year in the Championship, they had Maresca. The football was nice, the football was good, but even that went stale after a while. Like I do remember fans getting frustrated when they hit that kind of run before they eventually surged to win the league, where it felt like they were leading for ages, dropped off, invited everyone back into the title race, and then managed to get over the line. So it's one of those where like 12 games is that long enough to start sacking a manager when you've just been promoted and you're not in the relegation zone? I don't think so. But at the same time, if you know that it's not right for you, it's not the right fit, then maybe it is better to act sooner rather than later when you do have games coming up that are winnable. They've got Brentford, West Ham, Brighton, Newcastle, Wolves in their next five. Like, it might be tough, but every game's going to be tough in the Premier League. So maybe in a month's time in the new year, we'll be looking back at this and being like, yeah, that was a brilliant brilliant decision. We also might be looking back in the new year and they picked up no extra points and we'll be wondering what they've just done.
Yeah, I feel like this is a decision based on the culture of the club. I agree with you on that. Certainly, the Leicester fans didn't take to him, and that was the big difference between his Leicester job and the job that he had at Nottingham Forest, where the fans were devastated to see him go. It's certainly not the same reaction here. But as you say, on the pitch, they've been pretty solid. Like, even their goals per match, they average 1.3 goals a match, which is 12th in the league. They're not struggling for goals, which you would typically see at a team that's been newly promoted. They're playing pretty well. Certainly if you look at the players that they brought in over the summer, they're not pulling up any trees here. I don't know. I feel like it was in a no-win situation taking over Maresca, who was clearly loved at the club. They had their own vision, and Cooper's just not that same sort of personality, and certainly not the same style. So it felt like a mismatch. I don't think it's the wrong decision. I'm really interested to see where he goes next. I feel like Steve Cooper's really stuck in between the Premier League and the Championship. It would feel really odd to see him in the Championship, but I don't know if a team in the Premier League is going to take. I don't want to call it a gamble, but I am. I don't know if they're going to would take a gamble on him now.
No, I kind of agree with you there. Like, looking at Premier League sides who, well, if they were to be in need of a manager, a lot of them are going to be looking above Cooper's level. Is the issue for Cooper, and not that I think he's a bad manager. It's just he's had 2 attempts in the Premier League, and he hasn't shown relegation form as a manager, but he's not shown anything more than the 16th, 17th that Leicester are in, that Forest are in, and that's why I feel like if he were to make a step back down to the Championship, and I feel like he'd be wanted, like a club would want him down there. Like, clubs would be desperate for a Cooper should he decide to make a step down, and should any of the top half teams decide that they need a manager. I think that would be a good fit for him.
Yeah, when I'm talking about in between Premier League and Championship, one place that does make sense for me for Cooper to go to would be somewhere like Rangers. I know the position's not open at the minute, but you can't exactly say Philippe Clement's not under pressure. I mean, they're third in the league, and they're certainly a number of points away from first, where the Rangers fans expect to be. And it doesn't seem like an inappropriate level for Cooper, where he would be able to gain some European experience there. And I think that's the best way if he wants a Premier League job, especially one that would be more settled, as I don't really feel like his agents had a great track record of getting him into settled jobs in the Premier League. I just feel like he'd have more of a pick, and he'd be more empowered to choose his next job rather than have to take it because he needs to get back in the fold.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. I just feel like, I don't know, I just feel like I'm interested in what Leicester do as well, because they said they wanted the manager in before this Saturday. So does that mean they have someone in mind? I mean, David Moyes is the favourite for the job, but not clear cut. I mean, that would be an upgrade in my opinion, but I don't see Moyes taking that job, or I feel like he would need some convincing to do so. I believe Van Nistelrooy and Potter are the other two that are linked with it. So, I, also interesting. Like Potter's been holding out for jobs for a while. I feel like he was holding out for the England job and never got it.
Yeah.
Leicester seems like a step down for him. Van Nistelrooy would be a risk. He was supposedly applying for the Coventry job last week and then could find himself in the Premier League this week again. Like that would be interesting. I just feel like I don't really know where they go from here. Like what they really look at, because it's not like they were. It's literally only like 4 months since they were looking at a manager, and now they're looking at a manager again. So maybe they know what they're after this time, or maybe they're just willing to risk it. I'd be interested to hear your opinion on something actually. Do you think managers are being afforded enough time in jobs? I feel like we're talking about manager sackings like every week or every couple of weeks, at least like, even towards like the top level of the game. And I understand that, clubs want to, like they feel like they've got to win now. They've got to get into those positions now. But like take this as like the perfect example. Like they're not bottom of the league. There's a long way to go. I mean, okay, maybe it just wasn't the right fit, but I mean, it just feels like quite early to be sacking someone in this scenario.
See, well, yeah. So sackings certainly aren't a new thing. Premature sackings certainly aren't a new thing. But I feel like it's really heightened with the fact that these managers are getting job titles of head coach, which essentially means that is your department. You're no longer managing the club. You don't sort of, okay, you could say the vibe and the morale of the club is part of it, but it's certainly not the long term strategy. That isn't really their main focus. Their main focus is on the pitch, and essentially, it depends on what sort of objectives that the club has and the board have. But if they're really ambitious and they feel like this, their head coach should be achieving this, and it's not, then sadly, being a head coach just makes you a bit more expendable.
Yeah, I guess that makes sense. Like I look at that Leicester squad, and I don't see it finishing much higher in the league. Certainly, it's an age squad. It's similar to the one that got them relegated. Like the improvements aren't great. They're not overly visible in that squad, in my opinion. Like I do like quite a few of their players, but a lot of them are having their first years in the Premier League. It can be tough. And then you're looking at other sackings we've seen this year. Like Steven Schumacher at Stoke. Like after 5 games of this season, they decided to go different ways. Obviously, like almost on the other end of the spectrum, we've had Mark Robbins, where Coventry have decided enough's enough after many years in charge. It just feels like you hit this time of the year, and clubs get almost like twitchy, and the season hasn't started how they wanted it to. So the first thing they do is just go straight for the head coach, straight for the manager, try and switch it up and try and rejuvenate their season. And it's just like, it just feels like you can't have like an off time as a manager or a coach anymore. You the reputation you've built up previously, and obviously like I guess Kubert had none for Leicester, but anything you've done previously, anything you've done prior, it doesn't matter. What matters is like the here and now. And I don't know. I feel like, listen, like Leicester fans will be happy enough, I think, with this one, and fine, fair enough. But I do just feel like in general, we're seeing premature sackings that don't really make much sense, and then clubs end up in these cycles where they struggle to appoint a good successor, and down the line they're in exactly the same situation as they are now, but they've spent all the money on sacking one manager that they can't afford to do it again.
I feel like it stems from the owners and the decision makers at the club. They're almost not. Well, you could argue Steve Cooper was on track to achieve the goals, but I think they're actually looking to overachieve, and that's almost the standard that they want to set. And how rare is it that you're going to appoint a manager that overachieves? And if he does overachieve, you can guarantee he's not going to be there long anyway. And I just think the parameters are set wrong. Sorry, where they're just looking to overachieve their budget, the players that they have available to them, and that's almost deemed a success. Where why can't success be they're outside the relegation zone at this period of time where they don't look that great, they don't look that bad? Why can that not be successful on its own? Now, rounding off the pod, we're going to introduce a new segment where we're going to discuss the our joint best football result of in the UK. And we've come to an agreement where we feel like the game of Shrewsbury Town 3, Birmingham City 2 was our favourite. Now, this was one of my favourite managers' first games in charge of Gareth Ainsworth. And surprise, surprise, well, surprise to me, it wasn't for the fact that he caught on to the sprinkler tactic and used it himself. They actually played really well.
Yeah, they did. It was a classic Ainsworth performance. You know, they soaked up pressure. They only had 20% possession. But they they were really clinical going forward, and they really did limit Birmingham's ability to carve any opportunities open. Listen, as the game went on, Shrewsbury took the lead against a run of play. Aaron Pierre scoring, but they added a second goal 7 minutes later. So after 40 minutes, they were 2-0 up. John Marquis scoring that one. Birmingham pulled one back just before half time, and you kind of thought that they would use that and make sure to get a foothold in this game, go from there, build their confidence back up. But no, 10 minutes into the second half, and Tom Bloxham made it 3-1 on the counter. A Jay Stansfield penalty did make it 3-2, but they just couldn't break Shrewsbury down. In fact, the thing I find remarkable about this game is Shrewsbury made 171 passes, whilst Birmingham made 678. They made 507 more passes, and that resulted in one less big chance, just 5 more shots, and one less goal. So, in reality, they may have had all the ball, but they really, really did not create many opportunities. In fact, meant like a few of their shots coming from outside the box. They just struggled, and I don't think this is necessarily going to be the blueprint to beat Birmingham, but this is their second loss this season. They're not having everything their own way. I don't think they've been brilliant every game. They have been good and we've seen them be great, but I don't think we've seen them step up to the level that we thought we were going to see from them. Whilst for Shrewsbury, this is exactly what they need. They're now 23rd. They're looking up the table. Ainsworth's in. Ainsworth's got his swagger back. It's brilliant.
See, now this is a result that I should really hate. This game let down my acca on the weekend. I didn't see it coming. Shrewsbury haven't won since the start of October. But honestly, when I saw the scenes at the end of the match where Ainsworth goes up to the fans, he's giving it the big one, and they absolutely love him, I was just so happy. There was just something in me that thought, you know what, I couldn't care less about losing my money here. This is brilliant. I absolutely loved it.
And I do have to make an admission from the Thursday pod where I said, one of the reasons I wanted to pick Birmingham was because they're coming up against the Shrewsbury side who I've been looking to get against recently. I forgot, and it's probably not what I should admit, I genuinely had forgotten that they had appointed Ainsworth, and had I remembered that, I may have been a little more reserved. But listen, hindsight's a great thing. At the time, I couldn't really see past the Birmingham win, so I was stunned, but it was a brilliant watch.
See, I didn't even really forget it. I just didn't think that Ainsworth would work his magic in that short a time. But the bloke's a genius. We'll ignore what he did at QPR. We'll completely ignore that spell. But This Shrewsbury team, it just screams success under Ainsworth. Look, will they get relegated this season? Who knows? I might shot myself in the foot there, but I'm really excited to see what could happen. That's us for this week on the Football Breakdown. This weekend brings us next round of the FA Cup, so we'll have our eyes peeled for coming stories and hope there's no further postponements to football across the UK. Thank you, Matthew.
Thank you, Ian.
And thank you for listening. Take it easy.